Good morning, everyone. Jeff Lizerbaum here from Managed Solution. I'm excited today to kick off our first of three webinar series. Today is Thursday, August 22nd, 2024. I'm a solutions architect with Managed Solution, and I'm going to be joined with Sean and Lloyd in just a moment. And we're going to be talking about all things AI-driven cybersecurity. So it's going to get pretty exciting, and looking forward to showing you what's to come in terms of cybersecurity tools and AI-centric tools that go right along with it. All these times, by the way, on Thursday, September 12th and Wednesday, October 2nd, they are also going to be at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, and this is going all into the October Cybersecurity Awareness Month. In this webinar series, we're going to see a lot that goes into threat analytics as far as leveraging Copilot for your assistant. We're going to see some of the consoles that are integrated with the Microsoft 365 Unified Security Ops. We're also going to see some of the things where Copilot shows itself to really help us gain visual insight and additional knowledge into attacks that are happening and how we take action to prevent them. We're also going to explore other areas of your Microsoft tenant, including Microsoft Purview, where the new AI Hub feature is in preview, and we can look at some of the ways where we can fortify your data security for AI and control unethical behavior with AI. I mean, why not? Get ahead of the whole AI revolution. But you know what? Before we get to that shiny new object, we do need to ground ourselves and really take a few steps back to understand the basics of a good security and compliance posture. And that's exactly why I have Lloyd with me to really go over all those things. So I would actually call this the Listen to Lloyd Hour. So stick around. We're going to go into some of those introductory tools of AI-driven cybersecurity. And we're going to take your questions live during this webinar after our presentation is over, but feel free to post a chat in the Zoom chat area where we can also answer questions throughout the webinar. All right, let's go. On that note, I'd like to welcome everyone today to today's webinar where we're going to be covering the future of AI-driven cybersecurity. And I am happy to have with me today, I have Lloyd Bowen, our virtual CIO, Security and Compliance, and I have Sean Farrell, our CEO and founder. And Sean, you know what, I'd like you to take the floor if you can and kind of make your opening statement.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'll start with this. We don't want security or cybersecurity or anything with security and AI, any of that to create fear inside of businesses. I mean, our job is, to embrace security, and that's what we're going to be talking about is, what's trending, what's coming up. I mean, AI is a big component of it, both inside of the tools we're going to talk about, and then ultimately, I think AI is going to play a role in, what becomes cybersecurity threats in the future. As maybe the human being gets taken out of it, and the AI kind of comes into play. But all in all, the goal is it's a real thing. It's happening in our organizations, the need for better security and better policies. Cyber insurance providers are asking us to become more compliant and, become safer in our businesses, and for good reason, because everything we do is on the internet. And then vice versa, the businesses that we deal with upstream and downstream, they ask that we stay safe as businesses from a cybersecurity perspective so that they can be rest assured that our business being done together is done well. So all in all, we're here to just set the framework or create some ground, work for you guys where we can show how some of these tools are coming into play, like with AI, and in some ways just start from the ground up and kind of help you guys build your compliance strategy. So Lloyd will be instrumental in helping, and then of course Jeff, all too much about this stuff, but we'll hopefully make it fun and a great educational experience for everybody.
I have to ask you a question, and I know some CIOs, some IT staff from our customer base they're asking, how much do you trust AI? I mean, first of all, it came into our productivity environment with things like Copilot, but now Copilot is coming into Copilot for security, and it's being, injected into all kinds of tools that we have. What are your thoughts, and what is your trust level in using AI for this?
Well, I will say this, and I always use the human brain, right? We have emotional and rational decision making. That's how our brains work, and unfortunately, a lot of the time, our emotional brain, is the first thing to react to anything that goes on out there. So I do like the fact that AI is kind of a more rational way of thinking through things, and in some ways, if I can get to the root cause, I mean, no pun intended when it comes to security, the root cause of what's going on very quickly and rationally, I'm a big believer that it's going to be a big help for us, as human beings on the other side of it. So I'm a big fan. It's evolving quickly, like as I said earlier, and I think Jeff Lloyd. I mean, I think it's helping you guys out in the engineering world tremendously.
I would agree with that, Sean. I think a lot of things too is right. There's limited resources available out there. There's a finite number of security professionals, or any professionals for that matter, right? So we need tools to make those people more efficient as well, because the human brain we can't possibly deal with every threat that comes in immediately if you are just a one or a two-man shop, or maybe even a 5 or 10 man shop. There could be too many incidents that are actually happening, or alerts in real time. AI is certainly going to assist any team to address those things that are happening, because the things are rapid. They're not like manana anymore. We can deal with that all
Hey,
later. There used to be a thing, oh, we can deal with that one later.
Yeah.
yeah. And Lloyd, I've done a few webinars just in the recent past. I think this is the first time you and I are talking, but can you introduce yourself to what your role is here, and what the role of, a virtual CIO at Managed Solution does?
All right. Well, so I'm the VC, or VCIO. I do CISO work for a client. But it gives you an idea that my focus is on compliance and cybersecurity within our customers' organization. So I take people from, or take organizations from a place where they may not have a well-defined strategy as it pertains to compliance and cybersecurity, and get them from off the ground to nothing to actually building a well-defined policies, and based on existing frameworks. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're going to leverage frameworks that are already out there, such as ISO or HIPAA or CMMC or things of that nature. Right? These things are built. We need to leverage those things to improve the security posture of our organizations, and that's what I do. I assist our organizations in getting there.
Awesome. Well, I know for our agenda, we're going to be talking about, these topics that are, right down this alley here. Uh, what are the trends in today's modern cybersecurity threats? And then insights. I mean, Sean, I could tell you, you've been in the business long enough to see some real world incidents. Can you kind of enlighten us of maybe how the cybersecurity landscape has changed in your eyes?
Yeah. I mean, I hear the term a lot, the social engineering stuff that's going on out there. I mean, we used to, I have to, you have to think about it in the last, let's start with 20 years ago, and even further back we were communicating via things like email, and we had all that. And then you fast forward even 20 years later, or even to pre-COVID and more recently, we as humans are communicating different. We're social creatures that ultimately are doing a lot of things on the internet. More of our data exists in more centralized places on the internet, in these big public clouds. We've taken what used to be paper and moved it into, what I would consider, data that's now been aggregated. So we have communication that's being done different and less in person. We have data that's being, like I say, put more and more and more into areas of storage, live data on the internet in public clouds with companies like Microsoft and Amazon and all these big players. All of that just means that the landscape for, potential, threats becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And insurance companies are worried about that, which we'll talk about. And the businesses we deal with are worried about that, which we'll talk about. And like, I think to what Lloyd said, there's only so much the human can do to protect. So if we can rationally get to a decision or figure out what's going on quicker using AI and better tools, and probably tools that are more, I would consider, packaged well together, I think we're going to have a better opportunity to protect our businesses in the future.
I think that's totally key. I think you hit it on the head in terms of, well, AI is kind of that exciting thing. You know, we all want to see how that works, how it's going to make us think better, be able to reduce those threats or be aware of them even much more so than ever before. But a consolidation of those tools is actually, I think, a trend that deserves attention. I know that there are so many different tools out there, and we see it every day where customers spend on various tools to do certain things, such as simulation attacks, threat prevention, insider threats, information here. Given that we are, largely Microsoft centric, I am biased in saying that, there are a lot of these tools that could be consolidated into just a few different windows where you can see, all in one place where everything is happening. So we're going to take a look at some of those examples, by the way. While we all know that, all these tools, consolidation of them, AI-driven tools now, are really kind of an exciting thing. I think we still need to ground ourselves into the basic compliance areas. And Lloyd, just recently, you kind of enlightened me on a CIA triad. I wasn't sure what it was until you kind of mentioned it to me, but maybe you can enlighten our audience. And for those of you who already know, that's great, but maybe if you can also dive into it just so we can make sure we understand what the core value this brings.
Sure, Jeff. I love to talk about this. So we think about it. I look at the CIA triad as sort of the foundation or the fundamentals of all cybersecurity, because everything hits one of these particular components within there, whether we're talking about the C being confidentiality, I integrity, and availability. So if we think about it, we start at confidentiality, right? It's ensuring, as the statement here, data is kept private. Essentially, what we're trying to do that the right people who are supposed to have access to data, that they have access to it, and no one else has access to it. No inadvertent access to certain types of data, whether or not that is by a threat actor or by just a staffer within your organization, right? We want to make sure that people get access to and utilize and leverage the things that they're supposed to. No more, no less. So least access, least privilege in a sense, right? We just want to sort of think about that. The I, or the integrity, is meaning that the data is what it's supposed to be. It reaches its destination without being altered or whatnot. Commonly we can have like hashes on files or things like that we can say, okay, the hash is XYZ and at its destination it's still XYZ. So that is sort of making sure that we have integrity around this data that is traversing our networks or the internet for that matter. And then the availability is that our systems are up and they are available for us to access those resources on the network or in the internet, SaaS-based applications, etc. It could be our exchange online. So many of us are using that as a tool. It's generally very highly available, but when it isn't, oh my gosh, all hell breaks loose. So, because we look at email like a commodity these days. It's like picking up the phone and getting a dial tone, or the old ways of a dial tone. Sorry, we don't have that anymore. We hit send. But it's the same principle, right? We want to make sure that these services and things are available. And really all of the technology and the things between technology and policies that we develop and implement is around these three areas: to make sure our data is confidential, to make sure it's unchanged and it's the integrity of said data, and that it's available when we need it.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. I think this actually goes really hand in hand. I'm going to just throw this up here for fun, but just a repeat of our last webinar series, we dove right into AI and what AI really is, and especially how to prepare for it. And so here at Managed Solution, we call it our 6 Cs, where we want to make sure we collect, cleanse, condition, there's the comply right there, as Lloyd was mentioning, and then the uptime, making sure that it's available, so compute and connect. So I think that theme, this is probably a little bit more complex than the CIA triad, but it's really the same thing, right? We have to make sure our data is usable and that it is secured and that it's up. So yeah.
We don't want to scare anybody. That's the first thought. We want to get to, as Lloyd would talk about a lot, whether it's we have to meet a compliance strategy, or we just want to feel like our businesses, our babies are safe. We want to ultimately figure out what's wrong and how to fix that fairly quickly, which we'll talk about, ways to get there and do it somewhat, I would say fast. And then from there, we'll talk about things that are, going to keep being thrown at us, how things are coming into our world from, I mean, frankly, as much as we talk about the cloud and everything's in the cloud now, maybe it's not. We have a lot more devices and a lot more things running around our homes and our offices than we ever had before, and we're doing it over the wireless internet, which we didn't do before. So we'll talk about stuff that seems so commonplace to us as consumers of technology today, um, that have actually created more complexity, which requires more security. And ultimately, we're going to figure out how to work towards fixing and structuring your cybersecurity strategy. And then AI is going to play a big role in that, which is exciting. And it's not something to scare any human or anything like that. It's just going to add to our ability to be, create safer businesses in the future.
So from a like a virtual CIO security compliance standpoint, a customer comes to you because they want, generally like a managed service to be able to monitor for these things and to kind of help thwart or prevent, these things from happening. Is there any advice you would give a customer?
And 100% on the phishing side, there's solutions that are mature. Defender for Office 365 is a very common tool that we utilize by a very large percentage of our clients are using tools like that. But there's third-party ones that are out there, Proofpoints and Mimecast, et cetera. There's other vendors who are in the same space that are doing the same things in terms of trying to protect and stop these type of attacks before they even reach their destination. So that's one thing. But I certainly think that that's just using technology solely from a cybersecurity perspective was probably not enough. And that's when we get into security awareness training, right? We need to train our people to be aware that these types of attacks are happening and they're out there, that they're real, and to train them in ways to effectively identify things. I'm an old X-Files fan. I used to watch that show when it was around in the 90s. And one of the things that Fox Mulder used to say is like, you trust no one. So, and if you kind of take an approach, when it comes to email attacks or SMS attacks, if you're not expecting something from a vendor or expecting something from a friend or whatnot, be suspicious of those things. So we need to sort of change the mentality of our people, in a sense, to instead of assuming that because it ended up in your mailbox or ended up in your messages on your phone, or as an iMessage or an Android in your messages app or something like that, that you kind of think for a moment and say, okay, who would be sending this and why would they be sending that? And if you kind of think in terms of that way, it can protect you in a event of a malicious attack coming that way. So don't, what we say all the time, right? Don't click on links. There was a time where they were coming in an email and drive-by download and all that kind of stuff, getting a little more, into the weeds there, right? So there's always kinds of things. And, the technology can help us to a point, but we also need to make sure that our end users, our team that are leveraging the technology, understand how they are being attacked.
Moving on to like this next thing, the man in the middle attacks. That really is really defined where you know there's potential of someone maybe adjusting a signal flow. I'm trying to define it like in my head, but this is where people can come in and intersect traffic to change it, to change headers, maybe change like a secure web link to a non-secure web link and redirect it somewhere else. The statistics show that SMBs are more prevalent than ever in terms of man-in-the-middle attacks now. 43% it shows. Any thoughts on that?
I think it goes there too. I think sometimes there has been a thought that, hey, we're not big enough, so no one's going to come over and attack us because we're just this low-hanging fruit, and so to speak, whatnot. Sort of the security by obscurity sort of thought or mindset. Um, but I think that they are definitely an easier target, and I think that's maybe one reason why that there's a higher, the prevalence of, 43% of attacks happening with those SMBs makes sense to me, because they may not have the staffing or may not have the tools that are in place to assist in mitigating that. They may not have policies that are in place to assist in mitigating these things. The policy is simple as, nobody can walk into the server room without permission, and be
Right.
escorted in the building, right? If you have a visitor, that can be a simple physical policy that an organization can have that can reduce the opportunity even for man-in-the-middle attacks, because you won't have somebody be able to install a Raspberry Pi on your network without you knowing about it or something like that.
I was going to ask, I mean, Lloyd, we're seeing a lot of SMBs that we get to deal with. I mean, a lot more than ever, making strides to become more, we'll call it secure or really, compliant, I think is part of it. And I think back to what you're talking about, the way this whole chain of events happens, the man in the middle, these smaller businesses getting attacked, which then leads them into potentially their clients, which could be large businesses. I guess what I'm also seeing is the opposite happening. It's nice to see that, maybe these large businesses who source from smaller SMBs requiring that these SMBs meet certain requirements to even do business these days with them. So, for the SMB out there, I think it's important in some cases just so they can go out and, do business with their customers going forward. Is that some of the stuff you're seeing?
Absolutely. I think that gets into third-party risk. So I think we see this happening. It happens for every organization, I think, nowadays, is eventually you're being assessed. You have a customer out there, and the customer wants to make sure that, hey, are you meeting a minimum cybersecurity threshold? Like, do you have certain types of tools in place? Do you log activities or identity type logs, SIMs and things of that nature, where we're just keeping track of things? Do you have a disaster recovery plan? Like, these are things that are being assessed with additional vendors in terms of third party risk, because that is a huge avenue into maybe that larger entity too. And it could be someone as small as working out of their house that could potentially be a threat. They may be a small contractor that's doing some work on the side, and they can have some things that may not be the most secure, and they become a risk to the larger entity or their customer, which then becomes a risk to an additional customer. So it's assessing that over time between the third parties or even the fourth party, so to speak.
Moving on to, I know DOS and DDoS is a very well-known area, and it's just calling out here in just the latest data metrics here that the size of these attacks have increased dramatically in 2024. So those are things that, again, these are attacks that have been consistent. The types of attacks there's not really a change in that. It's just growing like by leaps and bounds and more bulk attacks happening ever before. But one thing I did want to shift attention to are the insider threats. Looking there where now it's taking longer and longer to detect that there was some type of insider threat. Um, it gets kind of scary, right? How do you see that, Lloyd?
I see it from twofold, right? You never know if you have hired or have a staff member that has some malicious intention, right? I think there's been some things that we know whether or not it's a well coordinated attack or if it's just somebody who becomes disgruntled at work and therefore decides that they want to inflict some pain on the company or whatnot. I think putting in um, controls and mechanisms to protect against insider threats is absolutely critical. And those things are can go from having tools like defender for identity or something like that
Yeah,
could be our insider threat. We have some things that could be implemented from a technical perspective. And then there's some common sense things, right? Background checks. Are you initiating
yeah.
background checks? What's your policies in terms of staffing? Um, and then in addition to that, what happens if you are maybe in the process of terminating a staff member and they have access to things, maybe they're an IT staff member and whatnot, right? So you have to have mechanisms in place built in already to address these things because every person that may be an insider threat, maybe from day one they weren't an insider threat, but because of certain kinds of activities or actions and things like that, they can become a threat to the
Yeah.
organization. So it's really important to already have well-written policies and how you govern
Yeah.
your staff members and whatnot, because that's
Well,
really where the majority of these things come from.
yeah, I was going to say, so these are things that we're going to show how to demonstrate things like Sentinel
Mm-hmm.
and along with the artificial intelligence that now is built in, uh, we're able to utilize AI to look at those anomalous behaviors a lot more,
Yes.
and hopefully that 85 days can get back down to what it was at 77 days, and then keep going down from there. But the AI tools are looking at a lot of the behaviors that are happening within the organization and putting in, automatic policies, locking down. I mean, the most common thing, is the exfiltration of data from someone
Yes.
inside the organization, large downloads on a hard drive and saying goodbye. Those are things and those are behaviors that we're looking at closer and seeing how things like Copilot can help us, especially within the Microsoft tool sets, as well as other areas. So, and then IoT has only contributed to the amount of endpoints and devices that are showing up on your network. So 127 new IoT machines go online every second. That
That's
is,
that's amazing.
I know, and I never really realized if I looked at my router at home, I am quite shocked on how many IoT devices I have. Gosh, there's smart lighting, there's
Yeah.
sprinklers. What else? I just installed a new thermostat. So
Yeah,
there you go.
thermostat. What about we have refrigerators now that are IoT, right? Could you imagine
Yeah,
that that your fridge now becomes an attack vector within your environment at home, right? If I
yeah,
just went and bought some eggs now, I have to be concerned that my eggs now are
I
something that
know.
created something. It's
Well,
amazing that,
I
but
was going to say the trend here, though, when we look at the kind of subtitle around this, is that because there's so many more devices that are appearing back on prem now, but everyone is really focused cloud. Hey, the cloud is going to take care of everything. My Azure, my AWS, my Google, the hypervisors out there, they're taking care of all that, right? Well, that drives the focus in the cloud, but it has less focus on anything that's residing on-prem. And I think something that's kind of contributing to this trend is not keeping up with on-prem technologies as much. I think that's pretty crucial to be able to put down the proper configurations. I always call it securing lateral account movement, SLAM. We always want to prevent, any kind of lateral movement across devices as well as elevation on devices. This next one is very similar, um, but wanted to kind of call out. We talked about the types of cybersecurity attacks, but these are the vectors that are most common today.
Jeff and Lloyd, I think this is one of the best slides from just I mean, kind of the foundational layer of how we do things, whether it's, we do things over the internet with Wi-Fi or email, or, we talk about identity management here. It's funny because, and again, maybe you guys could comment on this, and I'm seeing it everywhere right now, is, if we wanted to talk about the term cybersecurity as it pertains to email, one customer or one company we talk to may say they have email filtering and all that good stuff. Again, pick your poison on tools. That's what they have, and they feel like they're protected. Or another company might say, from an IoT perspective, we have endpoint detection and response tools, or MDR tools. Or again, there's a lot of names for, protecting the endpoints, if you were the IoT devices. But what this slide is showing is that it really is one ecosystem that you have to tackle, and all these components sort of intertwine with one another, creating a real cybersecurity, I guess, strategy. I mean, is that something that companies are seeming to miss a lot of the time, you guys, or is it?
There's something in the cybersecurity world that they call the cybersecurity triangle, or it's usability and functionality and security. And there should, if you were to look at that thing as a triangle, you would probably have a third, a third, a third in the ideal world. But we know things aren't in the ideal world. Sometimes in the development cycle of certain things, the usability may win over the security. And we can look at that in terms of how we're building out our networks and how we're building out our infrastructures, in terms of if it's a messaging system, if they're PaaS or SaaS or whatever they are out there. We have to focus on all of the elements of that triangle. So if we focus too much on the functionality of it, and maybe the usability of it, but we don't put an emphasis on the security of it, then we lead ourselves up to suffering some sort of risk associated with potentially a breach, right? Because we didn't emphasize some security elements there.
Yeah,
I agree.
The reason why I'm showing this right now, I wanted to maybe shift a little bit, and this is just one of many, many assessments, but a lot of assessments have a lot of controls, right, in common with each other. For example, access control, auditing and accountability. These are actually not technical things, right? These are policies and procedures and documentation. And I think, what Lloyd's getting at is that, these are equally as important as actually applying configuration management. That definitely is very, very important. But without having the auditing, accountability, maybe even documentation of processes of getting approvals or things like that, but also kind of leaning into how AI is actually going to be a companion of ours to be able to treat all of these control areas. So coming back full swing from a compliance perspective is looking back at the CIA triad and how it applies to our organization. Certainly, I think we can all agree that it's important to keep the data confidential. It's important that we have good data integrity and that the data is available and up. Now, in our agenda, we covered, some of the cybersecurity threats that are most imminent. We covered some insights into certain incidents that happen and the impact that could happen. And now we're going to dive into some of the tools that are AI driven. Now, I can't really start without showing you, gosh, what impact that we have today that we're seeing, Cyber attacks are on the rise. It's projected that in 2025 it's going to be $101.5 billion that would be spent on, service providers. Basically all of these metrics showing that costs are just simply going up in terms of cybersecurity. It just goes to show you that tools are going to become a little bit more appropriate and necessary in order to keep these costs down. As you can see, the annual increase of costs related to cybercrime, it went up 15%. 85% of small and mid-sized enterprises, they intend to increase spending in 2025. I mean, I don't know how many of our customers really want to budget much more money than they're spending as they already are. But you can see again that these metrics and the forecasts are just kind of going up and up. So what do we do to combat that? Well, let's take a look at some of the tool sets that are at our avail. Copilot for Security. If you are a Microsoft shop, we all probably have been familiarized with Copilot to some degree. Well, Copilot for Security integrates itself with the cybersecurity tools that you may already own. Copilot for Security, it comes as kind of like a standalone product, but it also integrates itself into the unified security ops that you get with your Microsoft Purview, going into Microsoft Sentinel, Defender for endpoints, cloud apps, identity, the whole Defender family. Let's see how it works. Really, the human, us, we're going to be starting with submitting a prompt, right? That's basically AI in a nutshell. We submit a prompt to it, but what happens next? Copilot for Security is going to trigger, and it's going to trigger a few things here in terms of this order. The orchestrator is going to determine that initial context. What are we talking about? What are you asking me to do and collect? Then it's going to start building that context. It's going to start executing a plan and getting the data that it has available. So in terms of Copilot for Security, it has a lot of data available for threat intelligence, investigations, the Microsoft Security and Operations Center. There is a huge amount of data that Copilot for Security can access in order to build that context. Now, if you have additional plugins with other third-party sources, maybe you have some firewall appliances, maybe you have some SaaS appliances out there. These are things that can be done through plugins to really kind of gather additional data. And from that plugins, it's going to generate a response. It's going to combine all the data and it's going to work out a response. Now, is that response in plain English? Probably not at that point. That's when it's going to go into the formatting of the data and then it's going to output a response in natural language. So that's really the order of the Copilot for Security patterns and the transitions there. From a perspective of what Microsoft found when they did a study earlier this year, they found that subjects with Copilot, and what I mean by subjects are investigations, hunting for things that are showing potential threats within the organization. It was 25% faster when using Copilot. It was 7% more accurate across all tasks. I mean, 7% is still an improvement. It's not a huge improvement. There's still, I don't think there's anything that replaces the human aspect of this, but it helps. But over 97% of the participants who used Copilot for Security said, you know what? I want to use this next time. This tool is pretty darn helpful there. So that's kind of what we're seeing in terms of the adoption rate with Copilot for Security. Now, we all know that nothing can replace the human ingenuity and the expertise. That will always be an irreplaceable aspect of providing defense against vulnerabilities. So, for example, security analysts within your organization, they can leverage Copilot and really kind of be a sidekick to them to help build some queries from natural language. Now, if someone already knows like KQL and how to write queries in that, that's awesome. But if someone is really kind of learning the ropes there, Copilot is going to be a really helpful tool in applying natural language and building those queries. They're also going to be able to get some threat intel insights related to specific incidents, analyze malicious scripts with one button click, getting some remediation guidance, and then providing that comprehensive incident reports for leadership. So that's really like a security analyst. If you have those roles within your organization, Copilot can help in that aspect. From an IT admin perspective, now IT admins, especially like with us in our professional services, we're more focused on company policies and device policies, identity policies, conditional access, and things like that. Well, Copilot also works well in this area. It helps determine if devices are compliant. It, it helps you get advice on configuration. It helps understand what new policies would be better and how would you test them out. And you can do a lot of proactive measures in identifying devices that may not be up to date. And also, finally, you know, gosh, sometimes we notice some troubleshooting areas where MFA was triggered, maybe it wasn't triggered. We want to understand the underlying concepts there. And so Copilot gives us a lot of insight into that type of visibility. Well, now's the time to finally dive into Copilot for Security. And I'm going to show you a demonstration of the actual console for Copilot for Security. And as I go into it, the first thing that you're going to notice is that there's this thing called prompt books. Prompt books are a collection of templates, and there's some templates that you can create yourself in order to have an effective and repeatable prompt that's going to work to your favor. So for example, if you're trying to investigate certain defender activity, or if you're trying to analyze any kind of threat activity out there in the landscape, the prompt books are going to be definitely a very efficient way of getting your job done. Now, another feature within here are the plugins. Plugins within Copilot for Security allow you to connect to other sources to really expand the searchable landscape. So for example, if you have some other devices, some log collectors or analyzers out there, you can go ahead and add a plugin in order to expand that data insight. So from that perspective, what we're really going to do, we're going to go right to just the plain old prompt. And let's say I'm a CISO in an organization and I want to actually get an overview of the organization's performance in handling recent security incidents. So I'm going to give it a, like what happened in the past 30 days. So I'm going to give it a prompt there. And it's going to go through and it's going to start giving me some feedback, and it compiles a report and it details various threats encountered over the past month. These include suspicious activities such as Azure role assignments, data loss prevention, triggers. Maybe there's even some suspicious login activities out there. And it even is able to see, based on perhaps some of the plugins and awareness of the environment, some of the AWS credentials that have been permissioned, some access and detection of some unfamiliar sign-in activity. So kind of a nice little feature there. It gives you a little summary. But the next thing I want to do is I want to provide details about a specific Defender incident that has been brought up. I noticed it in my Defender portal, and I want to find out a little bit more about the threat actor involved. So I'm going to go ahead and give it that prompt, and the response to the query is actually going to show me the actual user who is impacted, and it's going to identify the incident and information about Tempest. Tempest is the actual attack, and it gives me some background details about that attack. So, okay, good. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pursue additional guidance that I want to get. So I'm going to implement some because I want to implement some effective security measures here. There's no question about it. So I'm going to ask it, what can we do to prevent and protect the organization, and what are some of those best practices? Now, I mean, generally speaking, every CISO should kind of know what to do, but this is just an example of Copilot just being able to answer and put that into natural language so that it can give you a summary of what it recommends. So here it's recommending a comprehensive approach, multi-factor authentication, least privileged access, EDR detection and response, and a robust incident response plan. So that's really good, but you know what? I need something more. And I want to know, what is a plan that I should lay out in the next 90 days? So it's going to go ahead and it'll recommend a phased approach. It's going to outline some immediate actions I should take. Now, a lot of this data is actually being read from things like my secure score and improvement actions that I need to do within the organization here. And finally, I'm going to ask Copilot to create, I want it to create a comprehensive report. And I want it to have both technical and non-technical verbiage in it. And so it's going to go ahead and, as you can see, it gave me a nice technical support summary of what that plan is going to look like. And it's going to give me a non-technical report that I can give to the board of directors and hopefully ask for some more funding in order to help further protect the organization. Well, that about wraps it up for today's webinar, but before we leave today, I wanted to remind you that Managed Solution offers many things in terms of professional services, in terms of data governance, leveraging the power of AI, data security, advanced endpoint management, compliance services, and more. So if you want to learn about getting an assessment, or you want to see what type of offers are available to have a nice low-cost assessment to get you started, give us a call, 888-563-9132, or you can email sales@manedsolution.com. Next up, we're going to take your questions live on the air.